Holy moly, this is a big one. So we've briefly talked about this one before, but it keeps developing, and now someone by the name of Bellular News is covering the fact that every AAA developer might be screwed because their games are essentially developed on their in-game currency. So Call of Duty, for example, has Call of Duty points, and you buy microtransactions, bundles, tiers within the battle pass, all using that currency. Marvel Rivals has it. Every AAA game has it. Any live service game essentially has it. And well, the EU went ahead and banned them. That is what this video is about, and it's going to change video games forever. It's huge. But we've watched videos on this channel before. I'm very curious what he has to say.
Welcome back, everyone. Today's video is a true bombshell for the games industry. This is one of those things that can have true impact, so let me explain. What just happened is the European Union just rewrote the rules on premium currency in games. Of course, that's the home of Ubisoft.
So last we talked about this, it was essentially a rumor. They said that they were going to do it. Now they've done it.
Of CD Projekt, of DICE, of Remedy, and so many other companies. And make no mistake, the new rules that they have just laid out could change gaming utterly.
It will.
Actually change the games that you play. So you know those bundles where you've got to buy more currency than the item that you want costs?
So every game does this, right? Like you can't just spend your money and get it. You have to spend extra money. You have to spend $20 to get an extra 100 Call of Duty points than that one item that you want. It's predatory
or
marketing.
The idea of limited time events, of no refunds and digital purchases. These are all being fought against by legislators.
Oh, and by the way, the limited time events, that is directly battle passes within the game.
And when the EU takes action, it's a large enough block that it can reverberate around the world. And as evidence, how's that USB-C charger on our phone working out? There's a lot to talk about. Strap in. This one could actually...
I believe what happened there was the European Union like essentially made it a mandate for phones to have a USB-C charger, so it was universal, and the world just followed suit. I believe. I could be wrong about that.
Honestly, pretty fucking good. Oddly enough, you've got EU legislation to thank for the standardized phone charger situation, and for many, the ability to play ROMs on their iPhone. But now we seem to have EU legislation to thank for premium currency being threatened. So here's what went on. In September 2024, the EU proposed the Digital Fairness Act that was targeting all the practices online that make using digital services miserable. And in particular, it called out dark patterns in video games as one of the targets. And that's basically the growth.
And no, not dark patterns where video games are causing people to do bad things. No. Dark practices of the developers using basically psychology to twist the minds of people and get them to spend money unnecessarily for false practices.
Most manipulative techniques that trick and strong-arm money out of people, obviously especially applying to people who are not yet adults. And this is fairly weighty because in the EU alone, games are obviously big business. Revenues have been going up in the EU. Online games
and they will every single year
represented 74% of turnover coming from online revenue and 83% by 2022. That's all of those fun, dark patterns actually working and getting digital currency money out of people. But those dark patterns target the most vulnerable people the most. And there's no one...
Just to be clear, he keeps showing like limited time events. I don't know what they tried to do about that. So that's going to be one of the things I'm listening to more.
More vulnerable in the eyes of the law than children. Children who spend an average of €31 a month on online games, according to data from Video Games Europe. Well, that's actually went down from 2023.
I wish I had that much money as a kid.
Everyone's feeling a little bit of the economic pinch, but it's not stopped the EU from taking action to protect kids, basically, from predatory premium currency models. And in situations like this, there's often a great offender, right, that is held up as an example of something doing everything wrong. So you might wonder, is it an Activision game? Is it Ultimate Team from the EA football games?
Be.
Maybe it was Roblox. No, today... it's a game about horses. It's called Star Stable. You've probably never heard of it, but if this all does turn out good, we'll have the horse girls to thank. This is Star Stable Online. It comes from a Swedish developer called Star Stable Entertainment, and it is the game that may have just rewritten rules and monetization in the EU. So yeah, thanks, Horse Girls. Now, it turns out that Star Stable just uses all of the premium currency tactics in the book, which makes it a pretty awesome example.
It's because this game is designed for children, like very, very clearly, seemingly designed for little girls.
Right? Especially because it is targeted at a younger audience. So in March 24, the Swedish Consumer Agency filed a complaint with the EU-wide Consumer Protection Cooperation Network. That's a mouthful. And
Certainly
that
is.
complaint alleged that Star Stable Entertainment were targeting children and using harmful commercial practices that breached EU consumer regulations. Now, the findings corroborated much of those allegations. They found that the game made direct appeals to children in their ads.
There you go.
That they were using pressuring techniques like FOMO, which is
limited time purchases
when it's not, on adults. And there was a lack of transparency on purchases and loads more things. I mean, here's an example of one that's particularly rough. They were responsible for influencers promoting the game to kids without any disclosure of the spending risk. So in short, it's bloody well damning. Star Stable Entertainment now have a month to address complaints and propose solutions with their game, but what matters for our purposes today is the Consumer Protection Cooperation Network, we can just call the CPCN. They have laid out what they want. So I'll spell it out via an example. This is what should happen in the ideal world. You, dear gamer, want to buy yourself a new horse.
Nice.
You see that your new horse costs 300 star coins. The store tells you that's around £5, so it just lets you buy 300 coins exactly. You buy exactly what you need for the horse, rather than the current bundles that exist of 200 coins or 400 coins, meaning that you always have to buy with some wastage, which just ends up giving the company more money.
So I heard different. I heard that essentially you could just buy everything with cash. But if they do it in that way, there's essentially no point in having a currency anymore. So
in short, no obfuscation bullshit, no weird tactics. And worst of all for these companies, this will have them bloody well shaking. You'd have to have a refund policy, both for the coins and the horse. And
That's
none of this
interesting.
would be pitched as a limited time event where you have got to get the thing right now. So that's an example then of how these policies should be applied, and each is indeed a massive win for consumers. But that would not matter if this amounted to nothing. You could look at all this and think, right, so some Swedish horse game has got a slap on the wrist. No, it's more than that. This seems to have backbone. So here's the big important bit. These solutions are the backbone of what the European Consumer Organization calls key principles for trustworthy gaming environments. And these could cause huge problems for anyone who is using premium currency. When I say this could shake the foundations of the game,
So this is going to be the interesting part here.
Industry economy, I absolutely mean it. So these, which I'm going to spell out for you, are the minimum requirements for purchasing and using virtual currencies in the EU. And what's neat is the philosophy behind them. So the CPCN considers these premium currencies as an equivalent to the real money that is used to purchase them. And that for them means that they are just as worthy of legal scrutiny. So you can see how that is.
I actually didn't think of this beforehand, but it actually makes a lot of sense now. There's like this weird, so when you spend legal tender to buy something, there's a certain prudence that says, okay, if you're buying something through a company, there needs to be a way to refund it if it doesn't work, if it's like some sort of policy revolving around that. But when there's this little caveat of you buying the currency and then using that currency to buy something, all of a sudden, how can you get a refund for that currency when it works all the time? It's not broken. It does exactly what it says it's going to do. And then you're not actually buying the items, the in-game. It's like a weird legal loophole. I've never thought of it in that way, but it makes perfect sense.
In a way, a mindset shift that paves the way for actually treating these as they are. So just think about the last game that you played that had a premium currency in it. Whatever that game is,
We'll just say Call of Duty.
I want you to keep it in mind. And with that in your mind, I'm now going to go through the various different practices that this targets. So, prices for premium currency packs that are a little more than the available product. So you've got to buy extra coins, extra gems, whatever it may be. Obfuscation of how much currency is worth by always pairing currency with other items or multiple currency options. As an example, I think World of Warcraft may actually fall for that because it includes Trader's Tender in one of the new mount bundles. Another one, a complete lack of a refund option for making currency purchases or even for in-game items. So there would have to be a refund policy. That's something none of us are used to in these games.
Yeah, that's
also FOMO practices to encourage buying.
If there's a refund policy, that's kind of wild. Like, just I want you to think about that. Like, let's use Call of Duty again as an example. Let's say you buy a bundle and then you use it for like 2 games and you're like, I don't even use this gun, or well, this operator doesn't even have any different voice lines, and then you can refund it within 14 days. People are going to be refunding things left, right, and it's going to change how microtransactions work and what's inside them and what they are. This is wild. Like, this is actually game changing.
Those are
pun intended
going to be looked at, so some of those may no longer be allowed. And all of these practices are now something that the EU can hold against developers and publishers. Even more so if the parental controls of said game are not up to scratch. So it's less a case of me saying, can you think of any game that falls into those categories? And it's more me saying, can you think of a game that doesn't fall into those criteria? That's a good point. Humongous, which might indeed be the point here. We know this is something the EU have been thinking about in other circumstances than just Star Stable. As an example, in September 2024, the European Consumer Organization published a report on popular online games. And in that report, they targeted Diablo 4, EA Sports FC 24, Minecraft, Fortnite, and a bunch of others.
Minecraft,
and it was all about how the virtual currencies work. They were not thrilled on what they found in those games, right? Because many of them, well, they did the same things that
they all do the exact same thing
that we do not like. And that straight up means we can say that Electronic Arts and Blizzard Entertainment are being directly targeted by this body.
And Epic.
That really is something. So it's no wonder that the BEUC will be holding workshops to help European companies implement these new principles. Because it seems
did they mandate them though? That's the only thing that I'm not hearing though. Is it mandated that they have to follow this within the EU? And like, when does that mandate take place?
They may actually have to implement them. Everything that they previously thought was acceptable pretty much now isn't. And that, here's the shocking thing, that's not my commentary. That is what the industry response has been. So we know they are shaking in their boots. It ain't surprising the industry bodies aren't thrilled about this, and a big shout out to one of our Belgrade Games members, Neo Nebulosa, for directing us to this stuff. So the European Game Developers Federation and the Video Games Europe, or 2 groups basically, they've published a joint statement that expresses their disappointment with the findings. Let's read their statement. Quote, "We are disappointed by the lack of engagement from the CPC network in creating these principles, which introduce new legal theories and misguided interpretations."
This is brain dead. This is brain dead. This is as dumb as a casino saying our practices are okay. Everyone knows the microtransaction practices in video games are brutal. We know they're not consumer friendly. And you come back and say like, oh, we're disappointed. It's like, okay, be disappointed in yourself that the only way you can make money off of your crappy game is to scam people.
Of EU consumer law that will create confusion and disruption for European customers. Sidebar. Oh no, we're going to be disrupted by sort of annoying predatory stuff going away. What an awful disruption. Back to the statement. It will also present a challenge to the industry's future growth and could even deprive millions of consumers access to their favorite games.
What?
Now that last bit is the interesting thing. So understandably, right, these groups representing the most powerful players in the industry did quite like things the way that they were.
Oh,
change is dangerous, especially to the bottom line.
Okay, let me guess. Let me actually guess what he's going to say here. He's going to say that instead of changing their practices, because so much money is made off of the microtransactions in these ways, instead of changing it, they will just remove those games from the EU and leave it the rest of the way throughout the rest of the world, because the EU will no longer be worth releasing those games Holy Jesus, that's crazy.
Like this. But in a way, they're not inherently wrong. It is true that audiences do actually understand premium currencies by and large right now. And when implementing currencies, these companies were following, their best legal guidance, and now that guidance has changed. I guess just like how so many phones had like a bespoke charging cable until the rules just changed in the middle of the game. So now they've got to get used to these new rules. And what'll sting is the impact on their bottom line. They're not wrong about the potential impacts of all of this. Now, big companies like Ubisoft can probably absorb the costs of any legal challenges or damage from rebuilding their premium currency systems. They'll probably spend a whole lot to try and figure out ways around these principles. As for smaller companies,
lawyers are laughing.
May not find that so easy. But where things will be dramatic is the group's final warning, because it's the most threatening one. It's the idea that players in the EU may just be locked out of video games.
I called it.
With a game like Overwatch, right? That they would simply choose to geo-restrict access to the game rather than change their monetization model or to just continue the game as normal and risk EU lawsuits. It could just be they look at the EU and think, you know what, we make enough from the States and other countries, we really don't need them. That being said, the EU population is kinda huge. Overall GDP is obviously a very, very flawed metric, but as an example, right, just Googling this here in 2024, the EU's nominal GDP was about 17.9 trillion and 1/6 of global nominal GDP, which is quite a lot of money and a hell of a lot.
Like, if you're just using GDP as a reference point, just like, okay, let's make it very, very simple. Let's say a company makes $1 million, right? And they make it out of the entire world. And the 1/6 of it is the EU, right? So that's like taking nearly $200,000, a little bit less, let's call it $175,000 out of it. But here's the big asterisk to that. So if that's like taking 1/6 of the income out of that, then let's say they remove these practices, the way that the microtransactions currently work, and that halves the revenue. That's more of a loss than having that game in the EU to begin with. That's the scary part of it. And I hope that they don't do that. I think that would be an incredibly bad look for games and that would hurt them in the long run. So I don't think that'll happen, but you never know.
A lot of that GDP globally will be in other countries like, say, China, where a lot of these companies will not be able to go in and directly monetize. That could actually mean that they will feel the need to change. And in a way, there are two wolves inside me who are fighting, right? I suppose one of them is the pragmatic wolf. The other one is the almost like the last vestiges of some sort of libertarian idealism that says, let the market decide. If the gamers do not like the bad practices, the gamers shall not partake in them, and the market will solve the problem. And I wish that was true, but I feel there's almost a faux idealism in so much of that. Because these psychological hooks, these psychological triggers, they do actually work. We're in a world where you can very easily make, I think, some sound enough, philosophical arguments very much against regulation and all of that. And I totally get that. I'm fairly sympathetic towards that in many cases. But the thing is, we've also got to be pragmatic. And a part of that is being a bit humble about the human condition. And the fact of the matter is, these practices are not popular. People do not like them. Yet, people's behavior does continue. And these...
How many things could we say that about, right? Like, let's just use, let's take something in video games, but a little bit different. We'll stick with video games. Skill-based matchmaking. Skill-based matchmaking exists because it does increase player retention. We all hate it. We all do not like it. Yet, if it actually decreased player numbers, it wouldn't be there to begin with, right? So, I mean, that one that doesn't fit quite as much. Let's do another one. Sales at grocery stores. The way that Loblaws in Canada is the biggest grocery chain here, and the way that their grocery stores do sales is they'll decrease make a loss leader. So let's say the loss leader is toilet paper. Normally toilet paper is $11. They'll make it $5. But everything in the grocery store around that toilet paper, they will either raise the price of or leave it higher. Therefore, putting it at the back of the grocery store, you have to walk through everything. These suck but they do them, and human behavior shows that these things work. The same sort of thing.
Obviously are bad, and as people who
also, I have no idea if I explained that correctly. My thoughts were kind of jumbled. Hopefully I did.
Enjoy video games, we see that as these types of practices derive more and more revenue, they then become what the companies focus on, and that is worse for the actual video games. Because I suppose in a way, how much of game industry revenue comes essentially from psychological manipulation?
Ooh.
And these various business strategies
Over half?
that are designed to rake in revenue in a way that's not like really tied to the experience of a game that you purchase. We've just seen the share of that increase and increase and increase, and it's no wonder that as that is increased, the rest of us have become less and less satisfied with games. So in a way, if this does hurt the revenue of a bunch of companies and unfortunately leads to a bunch of job losses because these types of practices are no longer viable, good riddance. Good riddance, absolutely. Let the companies fail, let those jobs go down. How we run things should be a dialogue between the private and public sectors, and in a case like this, I think it's an example of the public sector, right? The people essentially saying, we actually do not like this practice. We don't want this to be...
Well, it's funny, right? Because it actually leads to more of a moral question than you think, right? So people say that they don't like it, and it's predatory, right? So yet they're still buying it. So what they're showing isn't what they're saying. So it's like let's take something outside of this, like smoking cigarettes, right? Everyone knows it's bad for you, and everyone knows that it's addictive. But the government hasn't stepped in and said smoking is banned. They've increased the price of it to try to like get people to stop. But there's been no like public actions by the government to like completely get rid of smoking. Yet we know it's horrible for us. So where is that line where the government can step in and say like this is a predatory practice? Like there's certain things like the FTC in America that decide whether or not those things are okay. But where is that line? Like I agree that this stuff, like just make it so that this is you can spend your credit card is in the game and you can spend money. Like, wouldn't that not make a lot more sense?
Be the rules of the game. We want the rules of the game to change, to be more robust. And yeah, the market will, once it adapts to that, find a solution. And if the new rule set is a better rule set, then that should be a net good. But of course, none of this will matter if there's no enforcement. Because one country making a digital consumer policy often will find difficulty in enforcing it because
this is my question.
You're just one little guy. Mr. Belgium, right? That's why even though Belgium has banned loot boxes, so many games simply just ignore that and still operate in the country. Like in World of Warcraft in the new raid, one of the bosses is basically a slot machine boss. We always have the joke that for the person in our team that's in Belgium, that boss just can't drop any loot. I don't know, there's an EU firewall or a Belgian firewall. That's a joke, but you get the point. As much as many people have kind of went, Belgium, you take him down. It hasn't really mattered because it's just Belgium, just one little guy. It's a bit different here though. And that's because the EU is, 26 other countries and also Belgium. In 2023, it was worth 25.7 billion euro in game revenues. That's a lot of revenues. And we know that their legislators are willing to take on the likes of Apple and Google when their rulings are being defied. They have done that. But more than that, the companies inside the EU are, part of a big global network, and that does mean that whenever USB-C cables become standardized in the EU, they then become standardized everywhere because of manufacturing limitations. I'm sure Apple would have loved to have continued just selling people lightning adapters in the States, but ultimately they seem to have saw the way the wind was blowing and made the big change to USB-C. No one wanted to have, of course, a whole factory just making EU-only phones. And again, thinking about the impact that would have had on the whole ecosystem of manufacturing partners, blah, blah, blah. So you can see how with hardware, it does kind of make sense. We can see though software examples
I was going to say
where
software
it's
might not be
really
the same
thing. It's not like you can just go and get an emulator for your iPhone in America, but you can in the EU.
Well, we've seen over and over again, like even going back to like Nintendo 64 days, like Japanese and American like discs or cartridges were different. So this is something that has been done before with just software.
EU. So the question then is, will developers want to risk losing a large slice of that EU-derived money? Or will they simply have to ship a cut-down and less exploitative version of their in-game monetization to European countries? If so, it puts them in a fun little dilemma where the American gamer may get a transparently worse deal than, say, the European gamer. And then you can say, well, compare your store to mine. My one is a bit more respectful, doesn't have as much FOMO, doesn't have as many tricksy bundles and things that basically feel like a scam. And that'll be a bad look. That's the dilemma that these companies face, and in a way, it's all thanks to a game about horses. So,
I didn't know the horse thing.
Horse girls. I guess that's a thing. Okay, tell you what though, if you want another story, another...
Good reporting on it, very good reporting on it. And the question comes down to is, will this remove things like Call of Duty points or in-game currencies? And I think right now it's going to be probably a few year-long legal battle of these companies' lawyers going in and explaining what their new practices are going to be, and probably nothing changing until a big company does it. Now, whether that's like Call of Duty or GTA or whatever, it'll be interesting because GTA Online has shark cards, of course, and things like that. But I truly believe that this is just like a way of putting a gate in between the money, the fake money, and the real thing for like legal reasons. I don't like for refunds, for things like that. It's a way around these things, and I think that's going to continue. Unless they come forth and just say, no in-game currencies. You have in-game currency, your game cannot be sold here. Then things would change. But will they? Won't they? Time will tell, but it's a big thing. It's a really big thing, and could hopefully change microtransactions forever. That's a big hopefully.